These may not technically be brownies, but I'm going to call them that throughout this video because pumpkin brownies sounds more appealing than flat, underinflated pumpkin bread, which is basically what this is. This is my first attempt making such a thing. I'm going to show you how I got this result and make some speculations on how to make better pumpkin brownies in the future. Please feel free to point out mistakes along the way. It will help me learn about baking and will make the YouTube gods happy. I started this off by making a syrup in a medium saucepan. Just a cup of sugar and a half cup of water. Heat was set to medium and this just had to sit there until the sugar dissolved and a bunch of the water boiled out. Over here I tossed in a stick of butter to another saucepan. I wanted to have butter melted and warm, but not brown for when I stirred it into the batter. So I just gave it enough attention to not have the milk solids burn on the bottom. I waited for the temperature of the syrup to get to around 240 degrees Fahrenheit before mixing in the pumpkin. Boiling syrup scares me a little, so I had to test to make sure it wasn't going to explode. It ended up hitting 240 degrees Fahrenheit while the camera was off, so I dumped in about 2/3 of a 15-ounce can of pumpkin. I was going to do the whole can, but it was looking like too much. My goal with the hot syrup was to drive off a lot of the water and pre-cook the pumpkin a bit. I ended up turning the heat off after a few minutes of stirring the pumpkin in. However, after learning that pumpkin is mostly water, I wish I had let it simmer for a while and or boiled the water out of the butter, which I foolishly added a tablespoon of cornstarch to. Just pretend I didn't do that. The butter eventually gets added to the mix. I had heard that powdered sugar was important to getting skin on your brownies. Powdered sugar has cornstarch, so I added that in case it was what makes it form. Turns out the powdered sugar helps make the skin because it dissolves better. So without even knowing it, I helped create the skin by using the syrup as the source of sugar. At this point, I added in some pumpkin spice. I waited for it to cool down under 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the temperature that egg protein starts to denature at, and added a single egg yolk. And as if this didn't have enough fat and cholesterol, I tried to justify adding a half cup of whipping cream. Now would be a good point to mention that another factor that leads to getting good brownie skin is not having the batter be too watery. If I had not added the cream, or if I had boiled more water out along the way, I would have probably ended up with better skin. I could have put it over low heat and let it simmer at this point, but I added a cup of flour and mixed it in. Then I put in a measly 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder just to give it a little lift. Then I dumped the batter into a cake pan. This is a 9x9 and it's spread out a little thin. I think in the future I'll try an 8x8. I put that into a 350 degree Fahrenheit oven, 180 C, and after 30 minutes, it looked like a big orange brownie, which is exactly what I wanted. A fork came out mostly clean, but I felt like I could use a little more time, and I left it in another 8 minutes. Here I cut it up after it cooled down a little bit. If these were regular brownies, they'd be the fudgy kind. I would not want any more water in the final mix if I did this again. This was an experimental recipe that has room for improvement. Let me know what you would do differently. If I can come up with a substantially better version of pumpkin brownies, I may do a video on that at some point. If you made it this far into the video, please don't forget to give it a like. Thank you for watching.